All right, and welcome to Leading During Crisis, the first live show. I'm so excited to have my guest on, and I'm really excited to have you guys here live. So we're super pumped for this episode because we have a major cybersecurity expert here. Is going to talk to us about a lot of things when it comes to everything that's going on with the state of IT, especially during right now. I mean, the guy that I have here that I'm about to introduce is super excited. So let me just first give you his background, and so you can understand the level of expertise that we're going to have for you here today. So Craig his name is Craig Phillippe. Craig, I said that right? Just want to make sure.
You did, Jonathan.
Good.
You did
All right. Good. So Craig used his background in engineering and law as a cybersecurity special agent with the FBI for over 20 years. As plank holder in the FBI cyber division, Craig investigated computer intrusions, stood in as a de facto incident responder for compromised victims, which is amazing, conducted court-authorized computer network exploitation in criminal and national security environments. So I'm telling you, this guy has a background. He's helped create and lead the FBI's group of resident white hats, the remote operations unit. He served as the senior cyber detailee to the U.S. National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, where he worked with national and international counterparts to coordinate joint cyber operations. Craig pioneered law enforcement cybersecurity support to the Olympic Games, drafting and implementing the first Olympic cybersecurity operations plan during the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics. How cool is that? Before retiring from the FBI in 2016, Craig served as counsel to the FBI Cyber Division, providing operational, technical, and risk guidance to cyber operations. Earlier this year, Craig and his partner co-founded principiaRAID, a cybersecurity consulting firm specializing in providing CISO as a service and strategic risk guidance for IT security and business projects. It's a company that evaluates existing cybersecurity. They recommend technical controls and procedures that are required to achieve compliance with a number of security standards or prepare for upcoming standards, such as the upcoming CMMC requirements. So I want to get into that. And also just to let you know a little bit personally about Craig, he's an avid console gamer. He enjoys bringing the occasional old solid state pinball machine back to life. So let me bring in Craig right now so you can meet the man, the myth, the legend.
Man, Jonathan, I'm pretty excited hearing all that. You really took me back through some times, man.
Nice, man. Listen, I'm really excited. So I really want to, I want to dive into your background, but talk to me about the new company you just co-founded this year. That's brand spanking new, CISO as a service, kind of a virtual CIO firm. And I know that it stands for Response, Assurance, Information Security, and Design. So talk to me a little bit about what you guys do there.
Yeah, so we had just seen a need for CISO as a service, CISO services actually, and the typical salary for a CISO is so enormous that not every company can afford it, right? But you still need security. And as I was joking about when we were speaking earlier, I like to talk about cybersecurity. I enjoy cybersecurity. It's what I've done for over 20 years. And it's pretty exciting to me, I admit, not to everyone, but just the companies out there that, because they can't afford it or they just don't know what they need, don't have the services of the chief information security officer, or even a kind of a strategic overview of where their cybersecurity should be. And there's a huge need for it. Essentially, me and my partner Jeff, who was one of your guests in your earlier in the series, we had seen a need for it. It's what we were doing for the company we worked for Cobham, for a number of years. Cobham was so distributed that we were essentially doing virtual CISO. It's something that we both enjoy, and there's definitely a need for it. Along with the Chief Information Security Officer services, there's security assessments that need to be done, compliance assessments. What we do is we come in and look at what your security state is, give you a good get well plan to bring you up to a certain state, whatever you need to be. And we can come in and tell you, where do you need to be? If you're just a mom and pop manufacturing shop, there's some very simple things you can do. If you're a multi-billion-dollar aerospace defense firm, there are a lot of things you need to do, and that's what Jeff and I have been doing for a number of years. So we're pretty excited. Company's been fun so far, and we've gotten to talk to people like you and get out there and just kind of spread the gospel of cybersecurity.
Nice.
So it's been great so far.
Nice. And listen, I love that picture, that frame right behind your head over there. That is super cool.
We can
Good
actually,
background.
yeah, I think we're actually going to get to talk about that. That was part of the training that I did while I was a CISO at Cobham, right? And training is so important. We'll actually talk about that as we go through, I suspect. So,
Yeah,
and
awesome.
Jonathan, I just want to thank you. Watching your series as it's gone on, it's super informative and super important right now. And I'm really happy to be part of it. Thank you for having me today.
No, I appreciate it because, you're definitely filling a gap here. We're, with your expertise, we've had a lot of IT practitioners and pros that have been in the game for a while, but, we haven't had a cybersecurity expert at this level to talk about, because obviously we all know, right? We hear what happened the other day with the Twitter hack, and all that stuff that happened. So there's a lot, ransomware and all that. So we're going to get into it and let's talk about your background, right? Because who else better to talk about cybersecurity than you, and so I mean that's a tremendous asset. So I'm really, really happy that we established that up front. We know we're talking to an expert, so I'm really excited.
Yeah,
so let's jump into this.
Okay. Yeah, the background and the work I did for the government, the FBI, and the work for Cobham afterwards kind of give me a good perspective on both the offensive and the defensive, right? So who do you want to who do you want the sinner to take care of your sins, right? So I've done some things in the past which were pretty exciting, great experiences, but it gave me a unique perspective on kind of what the bad guys look for and what you need to plug up first and real quick and from the security side.
Sure. So with that being said, right, that's a great segue to the first question, right? So what have you seen from your perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective? How have the bad guys, how have they improved? Because sometimes I feel, Craig, I mean, we're in Florida, right? So I'll use the analogy. It's like, the Patriots playing the Dolphins sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like we feel like we can't win. And so what has been the changes that you've seen from the beginning? I mean, obviously we knew ransomware was big. Even last year, things started happening. We read the articles in the news. We saw everything that was happening with ransomware attacks. But what has been the change from start of COVID to present day? What have you seen?
Yeah, so what is happening out there is there's been a, specific to ransomware, as a matter of fact, there's been a market increase in ransomware attacks. Now, the data scientist in me wonders whether that's because people are now working from home. They're a little more careful about what they're doing, right? It's their own computer. Maybe clicking on that link isn't as attractive as it used to be with the work laptop. And maybe it's getting reported more. But there is an increase in ransomware. And what we've always seen, this is from going back many, many years, is the bad guys will use the easiest thing first, right? Bad guys are, trying to take the easiest path as well, the path of least resistance. They'll use links and email and phishing to get, to compromise your system rather than, complex or real technical methods, 0 days, 0 days, those type of things. The links are the one they're going to get you. So we've seen both an increase. I've seen an increase in the numbers, but they've always been very good, right? At targeting curiosity, targeting fear, the human element, right? What can drive a human, the end user to click a link, right? You want curiosity, fear, desire, whatever. But they've been handed a tool in the pandemic, right? There's fear. And in fact, you and I had spoken earlier. One of the most important things you can do from a security aspect is start training and start simulating phishing emails, right? You need to make your end user comfortable with saying, hey, this is a bad email. A good person, a person that's, trying to do the right thing at work might feel bad about saying, hey, that email looks bad, right? Whoever sent it is bad, right? That's a tough hump for somebody that's not used to it to get over. So you need to train. And the best way to do that is simulations. And right before I left Cobham to start Principia, the final simulation we did involved COVID. It had just started, and there was a phishing campaign out there that said, click here for the number of infections in your area, right? It was just starting, so who's not going to click that? So I sent it out as a simulation. and we sent it out as a simulation, and it got great hits, right? It actually tested what we wanted to test. Would people click? And we let them know. But I got an enormous amount of feedback on it, like almost hate mail, which, you know, as a security guy, you're somewhat used to. But I got the "how dare you," you know, "dirty pool," you know, what were you thinking type of thing. And I wrote back to all of them and said, that's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you for emailing me that. I want you to think about it the next time, because we're going to be seeing that for the next, at the time, I thought maybe a couple months, but I mean, it's almost been 8 months now. And it's so important to kind of target what you're going to see in the wild at that time. You have to adjust your simulations to target what you're seeing, to echo what's happening in the real world.
Wow, you know, you sound like a sales guy, Craig. You know, because sometimes we get the hate mail too. I've seen it, you know, even here on LinkedIn sometimes. So I get it. So I guess we're in the same boat when it comes to that perspective.
Yeah, I will say one of, you know, and we joke about that, but that's one of the important things about phishing simulations too. It puts a face on security. If somebody is motivated enough to actually write you hate mail, and it wasn't really hate mail, obviously, and you know that well as well, but if somebody's actually, you know, taking the time to email out, that's somebody who will reach out to you if they have a question later on. And you always cement that with going back to them and saying, hey, thanks for the input. We're definitely listening. Here we are.
Sure.
But part of the real goal of that is to make security accessible, right? We're not trying to, it does not behoove us to make business more difficult. We're trying to make it easier. And we're definitely trying to keep it up and running. So that's an important kind of side benefit of the phishing campaigns.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, right? Because I think some of the biggest challenges that at least my customers went through, right, were having their workers now that are not used to working remote, VPNing in from either a company issued device or their own device, whatever it was, and not understanding how that worked, checking your personal email on a company issued device, or and I've said this previous in some of my other episodes, you know, they'll have the laptop up and the kids will say, hey, you know, Dad, can I check your email real quick? Or the spouse will say, can I check my email real quick? And they'll click the link. And they'll be on their Gmail or something, and they'll click some sort of suspicious link, and now they're in. So from your perspective, cybersecurity, right? Talk to me about some of the challenges that you saw with companies that you work with remote work from home, and how did that affect the IT bottom line for some of your clients?
Sure, and it's right. Remote is the flavor of the day, right? It's changed. You know, we've changed how we have to do business. We're operating remotely now, right? It's something we've never done before. I touched on it a few moments ago with, you know, are we really being more careful about phishing now? Maybe. So in working from home, it's not necessarily, and you touched on it just now. It's not necessarily the technology that's changed that much. The technology was there. And it's available to some pretty basic users all the way up to enterprise level. What's really changed now is where it sits in the risk, you know, in your risk posture, in your risk register. You know, as you send out laptops and end users that have never worked from home before, right? If anything happened, they could just pick up the phone. IT help would come right down. They'd be at the desk in 2 minutes. Trying to fix anything, you know, an IT hiccup that you run into at home, people are, you know, maybe liable to click some OKs or try and disable things. So on the system, just to facilitate getting their job done. And part of what security and IT, you know, their main mission should always be facilitating getting the job done in a secure way, right? We've got to make things easy. We've got to make things smooth for the end user. But remote, you know, you're really pushing the limits now, right? So, you know, it's even something, a NIST control that I always like to kind of point out is split tunneling, right? So if you have, which is very, very deep control, but essentially it says, hey, if you're VPNing in, don't Wi-Fi connect to the home printer either. So you want to make sure your end users have a USB, you know, if they need a printer, you know, they need to hook up by USB and not be able to, from a security standpoint, you should have disabled the capability to hook up to that printer via Wi-Fi, right? So Are people going to try and get around that? Sure. Have you locked down your USB, which you should also be thinking about, right? Lock down USB capabilities if they're not needed to prevent data loss, to prevent introducing, malware via the USB. So if you've locked that down and you send someone home and you tell them you can't print via Wi-Fi, now they can't print via USB either. You've essentially stopped them from working, right? Assuming they need the printer. So those are the things you need to think about. It's things we've never really had to deal with before. And it's exacerbated by the fact that, they're in the home office and the IT help desk is miles away, right? And sometimes not even in the same time zone. So it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, I mean, listen, that's me and my colleagues here at Crown Castle. We deal with large enterprise type organizations just like that, where they'll have IT teams spread out throughout the country. They'll have an IT team in California, but they have offices all throughout. And so, yeah, I can only imagine that would be the case. And so let's stay focused on data security, right? Because I'm sure the audience that's watching is probably into that, especially knowing what your background is. And by the way, Craig, I will say one thing before we go a little further. We do have a couple people on the live. So if anyone wants to ask Craig a question, we're on live. So things are, going on. So if you have a question for Craig, feel free to ask it. We'll see if we put it up there. But I do have a question for you. So let's talk about data security, right? So we have, we talk a lot about DDoS mitigation. Some of our high profile clients, they get attacked a ton. So we have a DDoS product that we focus on here at Crown. But at a more, let's drill down more deeper level. What are some of the must-haves that these IT practitioners that are watching, hearing it from a person with your background, what are the must-haves that if your CFO is saying, hey, we don't have the budget for that, you have to demand, this is what we're going to need to get?
Yeah, and this is again, just unprecedented times. If as a security practitioner, you're not leaning forward a little bit, and of course, there's nothing good about the pandemic, right? There's no good is coming of it, but there might be a silver lining in that. You can lean forward a little as a security practitioner and say, hey boss, we've got people working remotely. We've never had that before. Here are the things we have to worry about. And some of the things, and I will say before I kind of go down the list, these are all things that we should have been paying attention to beforehand, but they're really coming to a head now, getting dragged into the light, which it is good in some ways, but bad in others, in that they're not always an easy fix. They take some time, and you really got to get moving if you're not doing some of these. And there's really kind of three big ones that I always talk about when I talk to clients, and that is, the first is you got to be encrypting data at rest, right? It's a standard. Most people are already, but if you're not, just think about the situation where you might get compromised, the bad guy takes your data or your customer's data, and now you have to explain why it wasn't encrypted. It's got to be encrypted at rest. It's definitely a doable thing, and if you're not already doing it, that's something you got to look into doing almost immediately. The second, and I would almost say equally as important, is some type of dual factor or multi-factor authentication, right? You not only a password, you need that other factor, and what that does is it prevents remote account takeover. Most of us, I'm horrified to say, most of us use similar passwords or sometimes the same passwords across multiple accounts. And if you go on websites that actually publicize compromises, you can look yourself up and see whether one of your frequently used passwords. I'm sure no one does that listening to this podcast, but whether your frequently used password has been exposed. So what happens then is the bad guys have a password and they can make educated guesses at your company's password, right? It's probably going to be close. And once they get in, if there's not that multi-factor protection enabled, they can get in and kind of run havoc. With the multi-factor, it makes sure it's you logging in, and losing a password or having a password exposed isn't fatal. Again, man, that is a big use-X experience, right? If you're familiar, if you work for the government, those RSA tags, and you got to enter that thing in. And there's some good, smooth, and very practical multi-factor solutions available that make the use-X pretty seamless, right? You plug in a YubiKey, which is like a USB key, or some type of solution, Different solutions will work for different companies, but just critical to have that MFA. And it is easy to use, but it is challenging to implement if your company has never used it, both from a technical standpoint, but also from a user standpoint, right? If no one's ever used it, you're adding another step to log in, and you've really got to overcome that hump with a lot of communications.
Interesting. So, let me tell you why I find that interesting, because the common thread, the theme that I found in this episode, everyone talks about MFA, right? Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, that's it, right? That's where we need to be living.
Right.
But you're the first one that has actually said that it's maybe difficult to implement. Now, obviously, I know that your company could come in and help with that, but why? Why is that? Drill down on that for me, for the audience. Why is that?
So, and I was touching on it right a few moments ago. It's not only a technical, and if technical problems we can overcome, right? That's not a huge issue, but it involves purchasing additional equipment, right? It either has to be, the password is something so the other factor is something you are or something you have. Typically, it's something you have. You can use biometrics as well. That's a multi-factor as well, but the biometric reader is a little pricey. It does represent definitely a cost to set it up. And that's not easy. That's not always easy to sell, especially when the end result will be adding another step to login. So, I mean, you're talking to the CFO, you're talking to the CIO, you're pitching it, and you're saying, hey, you're going to have to actually do something else every time you log in as well. And that brings me to probably the most difficult parts of the implementation, and that is the training and the communications. Man, the human factor in multi-factor can't be underestimated. Folks that aren't using it are not used to it. And you have to give great communication ahead of time, great communication during great support, on-site support, man. If you've done it before, you don't want to do the whole company in the same day, right? Because you'll end up with no one being able to log in, no one can do work, and you'll get the call from the CEO's secretary saying, hey, the boss can't log in, we need to fix that now. So it's an exciting control and security tool, but it's not optional. It's just the tools that the bad guys have. You need to combat it with MFA. That's definitely one of the big ones.
Yeah. So talk to me about some of the tools that that the bad guys have, right? Like, we know about MFA, we know about ransomware, we know about encryption and all these different things that we can potentially do, phishing and all this. So talk to me about how advanced it is, because like I said earlier, at the start of the show, I feel like it's the Patriots versus the Dolphins. And we don't stand. Sorry for any Dolphins fans that are watching it, but you know what I mean when it comes to that. I feel like we can't win. So what are some of these tools?
Indeed. Well, I'm a Ravens fan, and I enjoy that my name is in purple and white. So I'd like to thank
you. There you go.
I didn't even know that.
Nice. I didn't even know that. That's cool. Look at that.
So look, the bad guys will go to the easiest and the least expensive method of compromise. That's commercial, that's criminal, and that's nation state. And that is simply the links, right? The phishing. They don't need they can do everything they need. They can do the research. They can find out enough about you on your Facebook. They can find out enough about you on your LinkedIn. I'm a member of the Pinball Enthusiasts, on LinkedIn. So if somebody finds that and sends me, hey, check the new pinball out, I'm going to be a little skeptical of it, since there's not a lot of traffic in that community. I need to see more traffic, but they can track, they can target, and they can send that email for 0 cents, right? It doesn't cost anything. On the other end of the spectrum is, you can imagine, and I'm not saying anything that's classified or anything, but you can imagine the limitless funding that some nation states have, and the ability of their resources to develop ODAs, to develop vulnerabilities before the security community at large is aware of them. And if they needed to, they could leverage those. That's certainly a possibility as well, but they really don't need to. The links, the phishing are just, they're successful time and time again. And when you think about it, they don't need everyone in the company to click that link. They just need one person to click the link, and then they're in and they can work from there. So you really have to be, you kind of have to think, worst case scenario, as everyone involved in security knows, right? You think worst case scenario, right? What if somebody's computer gets caught? What if somebody does click that link? What happens then? And you need to build the defense in depth to kind of safeguard against it. But the bad guys, from nation state actors all the way down to criminal, they have a full range of tools that aren't available to the civilian.
That's fine. And I just noticed, I just want to give a shout out, Kevin Greenan says, "Go Pats." So Kevin, I didn't know you were a Patriots fan, but that's right. I'm a Jet fan, just so everyone knows and we're clear about that. So, but Kevin says, "Go Pats." All right, Pats always beating the Dolphins, so that's why I say, and that's why I asked that question. I appreciate that. So no, that's awesome.
Sometimes.
So let me ask you this then. We talked about cybersecurity from I guess we could use, for lack of a better term, the weakest link, right? Which is our employees, and we kind of know that we got to train them. Right. We know, right? I mean, you guys know as IT practitioners, IT professionals, you guys know what to do. We know, being in sales, selling to IT, we know what not to click on and what's things like that for the most part, right? For the most part, we know. But, I think that, when we talk about certain things like ransomware, right? And some of those big topics, we've heard those in the news. Talk to me about the recent Twitter thing that happened. I mean, what's going on? How can we prevent that from happening? Because I'm hearing that when it comes to like the quote unquote dark web, we're already, our information's already out there. So how can we prevent this from a corporate level, that we don't, these companies, enterprise level, don't lose money?
Yeah, let's talk about ransomware. I kind of got sidelined with phishing there on the last one, and ransomware is typically delivered again via phishing links. Do bad links in email. That's the easiest way to deliver it. So the first line of defense, again, is training. Can't say it enough. You've got to train, you've got to exercise, you've got to live like you train like you live. But ransomware is a little tricky in that if you haven't prepared for ransomware, there's only one way to solve it afterwards, and that is to build a time machine, right? Or pay the ransom. You've got to prepare ahead of time. You've got to back up your data. If you back up your data, and we have some posts on Principia's blog on this too. If you have backed up your data, why would you pay a bad guy that's stolen, that's encrypted your data, right? And I'm sure everyone watching knows what ransomware is, but your systems are compromised. The bad guys encrypt your data so that you can't decrypt them, and then they charge you a ransom to decrypt it. And give you your own data back, right? So even as a home user, right, you don't want to lose those photos, and you don't want to lose, the music library that you spent, 20 some odd years building up, right? You've got the live recording of the boss at a particular night and time, right? You don't want to lose that. So back it up. That's the easiest thing, right? You back that up. And you don't need to pay the bad guys for it. At that point, it simply becomes a disaster recovery exercise. And again, I feel like I might be a bit of a broken record, but I typically am on this. That you need to train on disaster recovery, right? What happens? You need to rate your critical business systems, and you need to exercise and train on what to do if they go down and how do we bring them back up. And that's what you'll need to do if you get hit with ransomware.
Well, look, I'm enjoying the conversation, Craig. So I want to keep this going, because now let's pivot for a second, right? Now you're your own business owner. You're running your own company, but you understand what it is to sit in the seat of an IT professional, right? When you were at Cobham and what you had going on there. Oh, yeah. And you also saw from your background in being in the FBI, what was the things that happened when companies didn't take these precautions. So I know, in talking to some of my customers, the IT guys, they know what to do. They know this is what we need. However, obviously with COVID and everything that's how, companies knowing the pressure to grow earnings and cut the budget during these times, sometimes they have to, tighten their belts a little bit on certain things. And yeah, we know cybersecurity is a big thing and an issue, but financially, is that something that is it worth it for us to pay so much money for what I've heard be the term called a very expensive insurance policy?
Right.
Yeah. So how from your seat now, how do we get the IT guys know? how do we get everyone else on board in the company, the CFO and the CEO, to say this is why we should be doing this, especially now?
Right. How do you prove your return investment? How do you
There you go.
predict your return on investment? Right.
Mhm.
The best way to do, one of the more direct and best way to do that, I think, is just simple statistics, right? And you work with your SOC, your Security Operations Center. These are things you should be collecting anyway, just to help you, identify where you're being targeted, right? If you see an uptick on dropped malicious connections from a certain IP block, right, you're going to wonder why over the course of a month. If you have, if you're doing that email training, the phishing training, how many clicks, the percentage of fallibility that your employees are, and you can show the boss, hey, here's 80% of the people will not click on it, but 20% will, and here are the numbers of actually malicious emails that we got. We've managed to. You always have to be careful when you're talking to the board about that, right? Because the next question is, well, then why haven't we been? Surely we've been had at this point. But you need to show the stats. I think that's one of the statistics, or one of your biggest allies in that argument. And the other thing, if you're lucky, you pull a board, or you pull a CFO or a CEO or a CIO, whoever you report to as a security practitioner, that understands and wants to be kind of, it's the hip thing, cybersecurity. If you're really lucky, you pull a supervisor or a leader that understands that. But the question is going to, what if they don't understand it, right? How do you pry that return on investment? And I think, again, if there is a silver lining in the pandemic, that is a common enemy, a common boogeyman we all have now, right? Nobody, and I say this frequently, hopefully next year when the conference season starts again, and hopefully we can go to conferences in person and see each other again in the industry. If I find you at a bar and you can show me that you had global pandemic on your risk register, I will buy your next beer. Nobody predicted this, right? It's hard to predict it, but everyone should have it on their risk register now. I mean, that's something you should be doing while you're sitting at home, saying, "Well, got to add that on there."
Right.
And those things that have already happened, when you go to talk to the board, when you go to talk to the CIO, when you go to talk to the CFO, you point right to them and you say, hey, "We're living through it now. We really need to invest in this, and here's why. The bad guys are coming." You can have charge stats.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a great point, Craig, because I think that's the hardest part, right? We're no longer, the folks that I engage with, your peers and different industries and stuff, from an IT perspective, they're no longer just the IT gals and guys that, make sure that the computer's working. They're now, business decisions are being made based on their knowledge and their information and their recommendations. So great point when it comes to that. So, well, speaking of that, now that kind of dovetails into my next question for you, because I'm curious to know, I think that while there are some challenges, obviously we've discussed them in length right now on this topic here and on this episode, there was also some silver linings. There's some things that we can see from this. And when we talk about that, we're going to start to see some superstars in different organizations, people who were able to innovate and create. That's what this whole series is about. How do we innovate and create and keep the lights on and all this stuff? So what I think though would maybe a challenge for some IT folks, and I've asked some of them on some of the episodes, and I want to propose it to you, is once we identify top talent, people who we know are going to benefit the company, how do we retain that talent? Because I'm sure everyone's now looking for IT folks that are rock stars. And now the biggest challenge is, how do we keep the best people in house? You guys, with your company, you and Jeff, I mean, same thing. How do we retain top talent and make sure that we are innovating and creating for our customers? So what do you think is the best course of action for that?
Yeah, man, this is certainly a less technical answer than it is just kind of a personal preference and just a leadership style question, right? I've always tried to listen to the folk you have, right? You have the folk working, you've hired them as experts for a reason. Hopefully you've done a good job hiring them. You've got to listen to the folk that work for you. They're telling you stuff for a reason. And almost everyone at every company has one idea of how to do the work better. Most of them some of them are really good, right? There are ways to innovate the business, and you want to listen to them. Some you want to listen to and say, maybe that won't work, and here's why, and you actually have a dialogue. It takes a little bit of time, but you do need to give them a voice. Give the people that are in the trenches working in the IT a voice, right? And the other thing is empowerment, right? If there are a host of blockades, a host of checks they have to go to, you've got to get 5 people to sign off on something that you want to do. You're like Peter in Office Space, right? You're answering to 3 different bosses. You've got to empower your folk, right? They're there for a reason. You certainly don't want to give them the ability to write $1 million checks on behalf of the company. That's not as far as I'm talking, but hey, you've got somebody in charge of your firewalls, man. Let them run the firewalls once they've proven they can do it. There's certainly a spectrum there, but you've got to empower and you've got to listen. And there are people out there that have great ideas. And I'll tell you, the pandemic, again, the silver lining is we've had to change and transform how we all do business, right? Maybe working from home is the norm after this is all over. We've proven it can be done. And that's a great mechanism to change how we do business, right? It's a time where new ideas and new ways of doing business almost have to be sought out to stay relevant and to stay functioning.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, even Lawrence said culture is key, right?
Indeed.
And I think that's important. Good friend of mine there. And it definitely touches on what you said, and having people work from home, all right? Think about it. That's going to be the new norm potentially, like you said. Companies can see they don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a 20,000 square foot office space. Now we can maybe downgrade to a 3,000 square foot office space, save all that money on rent, because we have all these people working from home now, and that'll cut a lot of money on the bottom line. I also share this. Eddie Garcia, who is one of my counterparts down in South Florida, says when we were talking about insurance, when I made that reference, and buying an insurance policy, you buy whole life insurance because eventually you'll pass, and you'll want to cover your loved ones. You invest in cybersecurity because eventually you will get hit. You should cover your company just the same. Good job, Eddie, with that comment.
That's true. Jeff was just posting the other day a quote from Robert Mueller, who said there's 2 types of people, right? Those that have been hacked and those that are going to be, right? You're going to get hit. It's going to happen. You need to be prepared. And if you're prepared, you can march into that boardroom and say, hey, we're prepared, and here's how we prepared for it. There's no shame in getting hit by an advanced, nation state, as long as you prepared. If you have not prepared and you can't respond to that ransomware and you don't have backups, that's a bad day, man. You want to be ready for that.
Yep. And so, listen, I think I've been enjoying the conversation, Craig. I hope you are too. And I think the audience is, because I think this is something that is critical to and important to what we deal with in our industry. So as we wind down here, and I just want to kind of ask you this question, and I think it's important because you see it from so many different perspectives, from your background, from the new company that you're with, and the company you were with prior to that. It's I think the biggest challenge that we have, and the reason why I created this whole series, how this was born, was from seeing a lot of people that I'm friendly with in the IT community suffering, whether it was they got laid off or let go, whether it was somebody they know, friends or family, that had to get let go. I mean, gosh, we just saw last week, I don't know if you know Steinmart up in Jacksonville, big corporation up there, just filing for bankruptcy, and all those guys, unfortunately, now are going to be let go. That whole company, I mean, thousands of employees. So people are seeing this, we're watching it, we're all scared, right? The human factor, right? So from an IT perspective, just share with me, with your background and what how can these practitioners continue to innovate, do their jobs, but at the same time have to keep the lights on? How do we innovate and keep the lights on?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit part and parcel of that, right? You're keeping the lights on. We've been, in IT and security, we've been dragged into the light, right? It's no longer just something that that helps business along. If you're not set up to remote work, if you're not set up to handle the operating stance we're in now, in terms of infrastructure, I mean, most companies could be in trouble, right? Some companies don't need them, obviously, mom and pop manufacturer. You don't need that big an internet presence, but with the typical company, you need that. And they're critical to the company now. So it's keeping the lights on, but it's also finding ways. I mean, and we're all fighting for our lives, right? You got to keep your head up, and you got to keep looking for how to make it work better. We've transitioned into a new way of doing business, right? Nobody's done this before. And nobody knows kind of the right way to do it. There's a lot of good ideas out there, and you need to keep plugging away and saying, hey, it makes sense if we did something a little different. What we used to do, doesn't quite make sense the way we do this now. Do we really need the fifth signature on this? Do we really need this? Do we really need a physical signature? Could we figure out how to do it digitally? There's definitely solutions out there, and I think by keeping an eye out for those ways, quite frankly, they make things easier on everyone anyway, right? So you're kind of making things easier on yourself, but just keeping an eye out for those opportunities is, the way to stand out and the way to actually make a difference. Even more importantly, the way to keep the lights on as a whole.
Awesome, Craig. Well, listen, you filled a very big need on the show. You filled a gap. Keeping with the theme of sports, I guess, because that's kind of how it's been going on this episode. You hit a home run. I handed the ball off to you. You punched it in for the touchdown. Whatever you want to say. It was a hole in one. Whatever sports analogy we want to use. I think you did a great job on this episode. I'm super excited, and watch this comment. You ready for this one?
All right.
There's Jeff.
Oh, I know that guy.
You know that guy, right? The current workforce disruption is an opportunity for IT to transform from a cost center to an enabler for the business and change that legacy perception. So awesome stuff, Jeff. Former guest on the show and co-founder and partner with you as well.
Yeah, man, it's been great working with Jeff. Jeff's a great guy. You can see just really on top of things. Awesome. Jonathan, this has been great, and I told you I like to talk about cybersecurity, so I could go on for a while. Either Jeff, if you need a return trip to the seat here to the hot seat, I'd be happy to come back.
Awesome stuff. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys. You know what we're building up to for everyone who's watching in the audience? We're having all these individual episodes, and we're building up to the live event where we all get on and we talk and share our topics and take questions from the audience and kind of just help any way we can and add value any way we can to the IT community. Whether, we try, we're both, Florida guys here in Orlando, but I know Jeff is in Orlando. I know you're out in Annapolis, right?
Yep, outside of DC, yes.
Outside DC. So the fact that we can start to expand, because I'm sure that, obviously this is a global pandemic, and this is, from a US perspective, we're all in this together. So not just Florida here, this is something that can add value to everyone across the board. So I just want to say thank you for participating. Thank you to Jeff. And before I let you go, just shout out to your company. Tell them what you can do and any contact information if they want to reach you or Jeff.
Yeah, principiaRAID. We're on the internet, right? principiaRAID.com. If you don't know what you need as far as security goes, right? That's a phone call. Give us a call. And we'll talk about it. We do virtual CISO. We can get you that strategic cyber get well plan to get from where you are to where you need to be, depending on what your company does. And there's no shame in admitting, hey, we don't quite know where to start. That's why Jeff and I started this company. There's a lot of people out there who just don't know where to start. Cybersecurity is a dense topic, and we like talking about it, and we're happy to talk about it with you. So give us a call.
And I don't know if you heard, but the lightning here, I'm in Orlando, and the thunder just hit. It was like perfect timing, right? We were talking about cybersecurity and the threats and the bad guys, and then boom, the thunder. So great way to end the episode. I mean, if that wasn't perfect, that sound effect was not by me. That was done by God. So, but I appreciate your time, Craig. I really appreciate it. I think it was awesome. And so we're super excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. It's very valuable out there.
Absolutely, guys. And again, hey, listen, like I said, we're here to help the IT community. The premise of this show and the base of this show is just for all of us to kind of get together, share best practices, understand what we're all going through and where the needs are. And through my network, I'm leveraging some of these relationships to be able to bring that to you so you can be a fly on the wall to some of these conversations that we're having. So we're super excited for guys like Jeff and Craig and all the other guests that we've had on. Get ready for the next live episode, and we're super excited to bring that to you guys. Continue to reach out to Craig. If you guys have any questions, I'll put the link to his website at the bottom of this, so you guys can reach out to him if you guys have any questions for himself, for him, or for Jeff, and how to reach out to those guys. So thank you guys very much.